Then my mother was the only one that went to college, and she was the valedictorian of her class, and she had a photographic memory, so she could remember every detail of anything she read. And when she'd write tests, particularly in college, she would write verbatim on what was in the book, and they thought she was cheating because she'd memorize things just by reading. Yeah, so she had this really neat memory that served her well over her years. But she had scholarships to like Gustavus, a 4-year full ride scholarship, but she chose to go to St. Cloud State Teachers College, which was a 2-year college in those years, and she wanted to be a teacher, and that's what she became. Growing up, they of course went to a Swedish Lutheran church in Atwater, Minnesota. My mother was confirmed in Swedish, could speak Swedish. The family spoke both Swedish and English, of course. Mother remembers when the farm was electrified, and they had the first electrified farm in the Atwater area because they were the closest to town. And then she remembers them putting up the poles and running the wires out. You know, one bulb hanging in the barn and one in the kitchen. And things were really very basic and simple in those days. She also had a memory of first airplane that came to town, and it landed in their field because, again, they were right on the edge of town, and this barnstormer came in and landed this little plane in the field, and I think he gave some people rides and stuff. And by the time I was born, my grandpa Peter, mother's father, had passed away. He died just before I was born, just a couple months, and he died of leukemia. And they had no cure for it in those days, and he was bedridden for a while and died. He'd turned the farm over to his son Joel at that time, and they lived in town. And my Aunt Hannah, the oldest of the 5 children, lived with them in town, and she worked at our own hardware store. She was a bookkeeper, and this store had 5 stores in different towns around this town of Atwater, and she did the books, and then she also worked on the floor, and that's one of my early memories, is walking around this hardware store and just looking at everything. And of course they had toys that were to die for, and Mom, being the last of the children, didn't quite get involved as much in the farm labor work as the other kids, though Mom does remember, like in thrashing time when they were bringing in the grains and the corn, they would bring thrashing crews to the farmers would band together and move around from farm to farm, and she remembers getting up real early in the morning. Again, I'll say 4 o'clock, I don't know what time. They'd fire up the wood cook stove in the kitchen, and they'd start baking pies, and they'd bake 10, 12, 15 pies, and then they'd fix all the dinners and the lunches for the men, and they'd carry them out into the field and serve them to the men for lunches, and then of course they'd all come and eat at the dining room table at dinner time.